The Wii U, for all its faults, had a fantastic list of exclusive titles that delivered some brilliant and memorable experiences. It's just a shame that not many people had a chance to play them due to the poor sales of the console. So with the Switch's huge success, it makes sense to bring over these Wii U classics to the Switch for a whole new generation of gamers to play these titles for the first time. Ever since the Switch launch, we've seen many different Switch ports and remasters. Some good, some not so good. I'm looking at you, Assassin's Creed 3. But now it's time for another Wii U re-release with Pikmin 3. It's finally getting the deluxe treatment for Switch, so let's see if it's worth the wait. Pikmin 3 follows the tale of three explorers called Alf, Brittany and Charlie, who crash land on the planet PNF 404. Lost in this new planet, the three new explorers need to find food to keep going, search this strange new land, fend off the rather dangerous inhabitants and ultimately find a way home. It's a story that's similar to previous Pikmin titles and it does a decent job with a pretty well written script. On to the gameplay now, and Pikmin is a strategy type game that sees you controlling one of the many explorers and commanding these tiny little creatures called Pikmin. To get home and survive on this strange planet, you're going to need to use these little guys in every opportunity you can. The Pikmin can carry items to your ship, defeat enemies and help in many other different situations. The Pikmin themselves come in many different varieties. We have the red Pikmin that can survive fire, the blue one that can swim underwater, the yellow one that can be thrown further and conduct electricity. The rock Pikmin can smash glass and do extra damage to enemies, and winged Pikmin can fly over water to carry items to your ship. When you first start the game, you only gain access to one type of Pikmin, but as you go through the game you find new ones and allow for more ways to complete levels. At the start of the game, the levels themselves are simple enough to give you a good idea on how the game plays and introduce you to the mechanics of the game. Eventually all the explorers meet up and the levels do get quite large, where you have to access all the explorers and have to share tasks between them to save time and ultimately complete the level. But as you do this, you have to be careful of the many different inhabitants that can cause you much trouble. These odd looking creatures can kill your Pikmin in one hit and disrupt your plans for the rest of the level. So you best keep an eye out for these enemies. These enemies can be defeated by simply throwing your Pikmin at them and the Pikmin will keep smashing them until they're dead. There's also quite a few boss battles against some pretty huge creatures, and these are rather spectacular events that see you solving small puzzles to reveal the boss's weak points. The many different boss battles are fun and very enjoyable and quite a highlight of the game. If you played the original Pikmin, then you probably remember it had a pretty strict time limit where you had to complete the game in so many in-game days. If you got behind or didn't complete it in 30 days or so, it would have been game over. Its sequel, Pikmin 2, got rid of the time limits and made it feel much more of a leisurely experience, as you could take your time. For Pikmin 3, it feels like a perfect mix of the two. There's a limit here as you have to collect fruit throughout the game to feed your explorers, and a glass of juice lasts you a day, and there's 100 glasses of juice, so you've got to complete the game in 100 in-game days. That's a pretty heavily doable task because I completed it in less than 50 or so days, so you can take your time and play the game at your own leisure. So far it's your typical Pikmin 3 experience, but on the Switch, those like me who played it on the Wii U probably actually want to know what differences there are, and there's actually quite a few little differences. First up is the controls. There's obviously going to be a major change here to the controls as the Wii U version relied heavily on the Wii U gamepad, but on the Switch version now, and targeting enemies and the items have now changed. Instead of moving a cursor around, you just keep tapping CR to swap targets and it feels much more convenient. You can now press the Y button to bring up a new menu to swap and divide Pikmin into groups and even dismiss them. There's also a map on the screen now at the bottom right of the screen. It's handy and thankfully it doesn't obscure your view. We also have some small hints for newcomers. If they're struggling with this adventure, you can press a button on the D-pad and then the game will point you in the right direction. Expert players won't need this new option, but it's a welcome new inclusion for new players anyways. The main game takes you around 10 hours to reach the game's conclusion, which is a little bit longer than the first game if I remember, but you probably wanted to know if there's any new content to make it worth double dipping, and there's a decent amount of new stuff here. First up we have a co-op mode, which is finally implemented into the single player mode, which is a great addition. In the game's bigger levels, playing with another player make it feel much more fun, and it does really work well as you start to share out the workload together. There's also a couple of new difficulty modes. We have normal, hard and extra spicy modes, so returning players can replay the game for a much more harder experience. Also included, we have the mission mode, which includes all the previously released DLC missions for the game, and this provides plenty of fun and varied challenges that can be played in both single and multiplayer. These missions are highly replayable due to the fact that you earn a medal at the end of the mission. What medal you get depends on your performance, and there's also online leaderboards as well, which is a nice touch. Finally, we have side stories, which follows Olimar and Louis, and it gives us an insight on what happened to the pair before and after the events of the mainline game. The side stories contain quite a few little missions to help extend the game's length, and they're fun enough and do expand the story a bit. Presentation wise now, and back in the day on the Wii U, the game was a rather nice looking title that featured some lush environments, and much of that rings true for the Switch version. This game still looks great with many fantastic water effects and details, but the resolution hasn't changed. Running at 720p at 30fps in both portable and dock play, it's a bit disappointing to see that there isn't any huge improvements. While 60fps isn't needed for the game like Pikmin, 1080p would have been better, but nevertheless it's still a lovely looking game at the end of the day. Conclusion time now, and it's fantastic to see Pikmin series finally back on a Nintendo console with the Deluxe edition of Pikmin 3. We've got the best version of the beloved classic, delivering the same great fun and addicted strategic gameplay with plenty of quality of life improvements, as well as some previously released DLC content and some new content as well. It's a shame they didn't bundle Pikmin 1 and 2 to make for a Pikmin trilogy, but it's a very enjoyable game and a must buy for those who missed out on it the first time. So with that, I'm giving Pikmin 3 Deluxe at 8 out of 10 with the title of great. As always, thank you for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you could like and subscribe, that would be great. And until next time, happy gaming. Bye.